Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Aja Monet.
I'm always getting thrown into interesting scenarios, so thank you all for whoever chooses to stay. If it was up to me, things would be on time. Speaking of time, since I don't have very much of it, this whole festival began with a conversation about time and the endurance of time, and I hope that you're willing to use some of your time to share it here with me today. I'll begin with, first of all, as a woman of color currently in this world, there's a lot that's happening that I think we can all resonate with deeply in recognizing that patriarchy is a universal problem. It is not, it knows no bounds, it knows no borders, it knows no language, it knows no religion. It is something that deeply affects all of us. And so I come to you all here, to Romania, standing in the tradition of the Black radical feminist tradition, of women who have constantly devoted their lives to trying to reimagine the ways that we respond to patriarchy, to the ways that we respond to systems of oppression, and the many ways that we've had to decolonize our imaginations to create the world that we want to see, even though our physical conditions kept us away from living the world that we wanted to see. I'm gonna start with a quote by Robin Kelly, Robin D.G. Kelly, who's an incredible scholar, thinker, organizer from the States. He wrote a book called Freedom Dreams. And in that book, he touches on the Black radical tradition and how our imagination and our visions are where we start to begin to discuss, to transform the very realities we live in. I was in a talk a little earlier where I saw the conversation and the question of the role of art and culture constantly comes up. And one of the women posed the juxtaposition of, does culture come first or does politics? And I believe culture informs politics. There could be no politics without culture. So Romania knows that because there was a cultural Cold War. And if we know anything about cultural Cold War, we know that there's propaganda that usually comes with any ideas around politics, militarization, etc. That even this can be seen as a part of propaganda, this very festival. So for us to be aware that ideas are powerful, that the ideas and the words and the language we use, and how we set up and create space for people, how we include voices, how we make room for voices that are not typically heard, is a big part of where we show and demonstrate our values, how we illustrate our radical imagination and the tradition that we want to practice. So this is the quote from Robin Kelly. Too often our standards for evaluating social movements pivot around whether or not they succeeded in realizing their visions rather than on the merits or power of the visions themselves. By such measure, virtually every radical movement failed because the basic power relations they sought to change remained pretty much intact. And yet, it is precisely these alternative visions and dreams that inspire new generations to struggle for change. I join you to welcome me today in listening, radical listening and active listening, and how poetry can help us restructure our visioning and imagining the worlds that we want to live in. I'm going to begin with a poem that I wrote here in Romania. I finished it yesterday at the Artichoke Coffee Shop. It's inspired by a poem called Power by Audre Lorde. Ooh, that might not be mine. To give you some context for this poem, Audre Lorde wrote this poem called Power, which was about an instance of police brutality where a young 10-year-old black boy was killed by a police officer in 1973, Clifford Brown. And in this case, the police officer was trying to make the argument that this 10-year-old boy took a gun from his father, shot at him, and therefore he had legitimate reason to shoot at the 10-year-old boy. We all know that the story was fabricated, but in light of justice not always being seen, 11 white male jury members let the police officer get away with killing an unarmed young black boy. And she brings the question of power. What does it mean to have power? A poet howls in the spirit of words, a tongue that trembles with the tension of truth. The difference between poetry and rhetoric is meaning, is fearlessness, the ability to transform, alter, shift self towards collective action, to risk, riot. A poet writes to balance the scales of power, yet feels the absence of power. Still, a poem is not a knife or a gun or a fist or food. Hold on one second, y'all. I gotta make sure this is all together. Unless the knife or gun or fist is a pen or clothes, and still a pen is only a sword, not a home, is not louder than a bomb, is not flesh or blood, cannot unrape you nor undo your doing. Yet a poem is a doing still, warbling within whoever listens or reads beneath the words. There is a living. And though we write, it is no choice to choose between two choices. How we respond to power reveals who we are, whether more or less, a flex or relinquish, how we tug, push, pull, or plead. Power is a dance between will and surrender, to kill or sacrifice. Murder is still powerless. A poet writes to balance the scales. Any child that dies cannot undie in a poem, nor can a jury undie our children. There are no words to heal a murder. You cannot unkill a child with dreams or kisses, with poetry or rhetoric, with awards or accolades, with judges or prisons. Losing a child is a suicide. The difference between killing yourself and killing yourself is love and death. What world will we leave our children? Heal now or slaughter the future. You only live once, and still you are not the only to live. Being so present, you forget tomorrow or yesterday that there will be others. There were others. What say R.J. Lord to Margaret Garner of power? What power is a choice between lesser evils? Whether killing your children is killing yourself, whether you kill yourself or your children, whether murder is your only choice, you are powerless. Power is in the wave that moves. The way change is God, so is spirit or soul sees through, or like love. The more you control, the more it controls you. The difference between poetry and rhetoric is Darin Tartor, a Palestinian poet who has been in prison for the past 3 years, recently just got out, for a poem she wrote and published on Facebook. The difference between poetry and rhetoric is Darin Tartor, because a poem can ignite a people, power to do, to change, to resist, and balance the scales. When a foot is on your neck, it does not matter how you get it off, what words you say, what weapons you use, knife or pen. So long as you do is survival. And it becomes less and less important what someone thinks about how you resist, unless, of course, they are willing to take the foot off your neck, too. To create and to make art in the efforts and on behalf of the dispossessed is a practice of U.S. third world feminism. And to be concerned with nomadic and traveling across nation states of meaning, which is why I want to conjure and lift up the Roma community across here in Europe, a community that I think is often underrepresented, judged, politicized in every way. But the very basis of the Roma community, which is rooted in nomadic tradition, the Bedouin community, which is rooted in nomadic tradition, begs of us to challenge our alliance with nation states and borders, begs of us to challenge our alliance with elitism and cultural language and norms. And so when we get into the conversation of imagination, we start to have conversations about the nomadic power of ideas, how ideas and language and art and culture can travel beyond borders and pushes us to break down these nation states that we are so attached to, these flags that we ride so passionately for, that we kill in the name of. It requires decolonizing the imagination, and our differences are our connections as women. The sparking and the inciting of creativity. Women may not share the same language, as I've mentioned, the culture, the race, or sexual orientation, nor ideology. However, even in our differences, we are informed by how we are the same. And so women have learned the radical tradition of celebrating difference so that we may create and envision and liberate our future generations. So these next few poems are dedicated to the women in the room. Hexes. And there was a reckoning for all the harm and for all the evil eyes, and our strength was cute until it wasn't, and we were weak until we weren't, and your longing will be long, and your days will be numbered, and we are counting on the stems who had their petals taken in this spell for flowers, on the busted lips and bruised cheeks, and there was loss, and our smiles will terrify you, because we will be laughing, and we will be cruel, and there will be no remorse, and your children will be ours, and we will make new ways without you, and you will miss who you could have been. Admit you were never intent on loving anyone but yourself, and sacrifice is the ego's kryptonite, and your heart is a tomb, mummified corpses where we are only body parts, and the thighs will haunt you, and the breasts will mock you, and the asses will shit wherever you lay, and the fists will find you on street corners, in the alleys or offices, in a titty bar, atop a lover or below one, erotic and afraid. Everywhere there will be a fist, and your knees will buckle, and there will be a curse and some manner of sorcery, stanzas upon stanzas of stories, and we will feed you morsels of your own medicine, pages and pages of feeds, and the pharmaceutical industry will go broke, and you will go broke, and the countries will end, and we will love. How many of you have mothers? My mother's the kind of person, if she met you, she'd say, "I did the best I could." It's the first thing she would say. And even still, there's always more that could be done. This is for the mothers who did the best they could. She does not know we are sisters. Even it be years we don't speak, on my spirit, sacred as a smile that survives a good cry. I hold her close just before the sun rests on a building across the water, spills a shoulder on the street, and we lean on love for the first time in a long while since 2 open palms ago, praying or holding a framed memory. I am somebody's daughter again. I speak like I belong in her echo. I watch chaos control a heart, a wild repression from a distance, loving everybody from a distance. Ease me from spending too much time with my likeness from a distance, the crossfire carnival of childhood. reappearing images, a pinch in every dream, silent as a paper cut from a distance, a single mother alone, making do with what may, what madness comes of survival of the fittest. If spirits prove we reach beyond, can we love at a distance? I am rueful and wicked to wait so long before touching my mother this soft, like I lay our avenue down for her feet, and we walk toward the bus, a skyline humming in our hug, embracing the drops between us. I have kept each tear, never fully fallen, choosing this dimpled woman as a portal. What I meant was I am vulnerable. I am a daughter. If I do not hear my mother's laughter, it could go years. Every room is a prison. Every love is a lie. Every friend is a foe. I cannot tell the difference between her wailing and mine. My mother does not know we are sisters. There's another poem I want to read for you all. Hold on, let me see. Here it goes. I was invited by the Women's March Global, which is an international branch of the Women's March. They've done them across the world, to write a poem for a video that they had for the G7 conference, summit, whatever they did. And I wrote this poem. She who unruins us, who fears her own tongue, loose in words direct as kisses sung of partitioned heart or body part trafficked in the distance, born of a mouth on the run. She who risks riots and braves eyes on a front line, who heals earthquakes and conjures tsunamis through despair or neglect, a force of nature. She who plants rubies that sunset tills, a breeze carries gold light across leaves. She who presses the earth to replenish itself between furrows of terror or torment, who defended us from mobs and militias. She who befriends trees that bear no fruit, who sweeps dust midday off root and readies rain, rids rooms of looming words, saves misfortunes thrown out on running streams, waves of daughters left in canoes washed ashore. She who shades under a date palm, her mother's laughter in the background. Anywhere she smiles is a survival. A woman survives silence or memory, dismissive regimes, dictators, or death. She who mourns to remember what the governed rather forget. We are who raises us, a story. Every child is an old ending, a new list of demands, broken taboos and treaties. She who chose hijab over veiled spirit, crazy horse over oil canteen, who sifts soil and tear gas canisters for flowers. She who surrenders with honor, a woman's sword sharpened by wind's teeth. Her voice never dies. Ancestors' candor kidnapped by a commercial for lipstick. She who bloodied diamonds, who wept thighs and scorched laws, her fists a wrath of fingers loving each other, a strength in numbers. She who lives in a remote village, who beheads her rapists at night on a busy street corner and spits up a scarred moon. That poem was actually inspired by a woman who beheaded her rapist, who's from Turkey. How many of you have heard that story? And she was charged for it. Crazy, huh? I say all of this in a time when my country's fucking crazy. I guess every single country has those issues, right? But I mean, we're trying to put a Supreme Court judge that's openly accused and known of abusing women. And I will say, though, I never thought I'd live to see the day where women would come together and start speaking out publicly. This is something I never thought I would see. So give it up for the women who have been so fearless. Because it is true that we end up internalizing and believe we were the ones that were wrong. So crazy how that works, huh? This is called What Riots True. If we don't talk about the moments we fought back, the efforts to resist, we will forever go down in history as being complacent with our oppression and therein complicit in the oppression of others. Tell the stories of those who fought back and why. What compels a person to anger, to radical love? They'll tell you militancy is a story of soldiers intended to kill and not of lovers intent on living, nor of the grass that uproots concrete pavement or storms that cleanse land. Nature is militant towards survival. We are taught a history of misconceptions, distorted partial truths. Indifference is a deafening death. The scripts we live by animate us with meaning. We argue from dawn to sunset. But if we are not united, if we are not unified, we will be enemies by tomorrow. If we do not have food, we cannot think. Full bellies, let us reason. So fill the hungry with nuance. Hunger is a person not full, half-empty. People obey any hand that feeds them. Do not argue with hunger unless you are prepared to have your hand bitten off. Depressed as you may be, this too shall pass. Everybody is mourning. It's not just the family. No one owns the pain. Everyone is terrorized. Let go of yourself. Let go. You can only move as fast as you will, and even the best of us is no better than the worst. Once a word is spoken, you cannot take it back. Be weary of your words. They speak things into existence. There's no such thing as those children, them children. It is our children, or it's no children. When young people cannot vote, their political voice has always been protest. It is much easier to organize a rebellion when all the tanks are pointed at the same place. Be wary of your identity. Your identity is not who you are. What kind of person will we become if we are not who we think we are? It didn't occur to us that you can come back from a beating until Fannie Lou came back from a beating. Hypocrisy makes people so happy, and truth makes them so sad. Compassion hushes wrath, a generation destroyed by Facebook. The human face is now undecipherable, and they cannot read anything that does not look like them. Everyone can hear your thoughts before you think them. We quarrel with self, conversations as quiet meditations, poems wrinkled by loneliness. Google maps the heart. Passion is a prison of surveillance. Emotions are actionless, and actions are emotionless. People expect comfort more than freedom, and individualism becomes self-care. But the women are freeing their nipples, true or false. I'm going to read one more poem, and then I'm going to share a little bit about the work that we do back home, because I think it gives a bit of context. I have so many poems I can go into, so many different things, but I do what I'm called to at the time. This poem is called Dark Matter, and I'm coming to you from the future of the most extreme capitalist, white, patriarchal, fucked up country in the world. I'm coming to tell you and to warn you that capitalism does not have all the answers, that maybe communism wasn't great, but we gotta find somewhere in between, because if corporations start running everything, we're doomed. And this is the reality we have lived. We are in a country run by corporations, and it is a country that is unjust. It is a country that cannot see justice if it slapped them in the fucking face. It does not know how to reason its greed with the truth of reality, which is all of us deserve dignity, humanity, a decent meal, a roof over our heads, education, and basic needs. And you can argue that with me, but I know that if y'all broke your leg tomorrow, you could get health care really quickly, right? You can get treated. Somewhere in Europe, you can go and get treated for something affordable. The average American cannot do that. And so we have to find a balance between the freedom to create and to innovate and to risk and to create new ideas, but also the fact that your new ideas shouldn't come at the expense of other people's labor, sweat, blood, tears, and death. I heard the first opening talk with Jason, and he talked about virtual realities and how every reality is a virtual reality, and it'll be so great if we can live in our own worlds and realities. But I want to ask all of you, what would it cost for you to live your own reality, and who would have to pay the price for that reality? Who is paying the price for the realities that we live? This is a question we must always ask ourselves. So this poem is called Dark Matter. I wrote this in time of Black Lives Matter, which was ironic because physicists were trying to figure out dark matter, and I thought, well, look around. Don't let anything or anyone snatch you out of happiness, which in all honesty, as opposed to selling something, is gratitude. How many times a day do you say thank you instead of assault at a head? How ready the heart for values that cannot be measured by the dollar or advertisement, which is my master and yours too. In all honesty, had that been something of value, there are no gods in America unless, of course, your God is green, greedy, complicit, complacent, compliant, and easily compromised. It would ease so many in their conscience if I say money is not the enemy. Yet, who are we kidding? Don't we already know enemies aren't real except perceived threats? So you mean to tell me that you worship your heart, or your Jesus, or your Allah, or your Jehovah, or your love? Are you sure? Are you sure there isn't something else guiding you each day out the door toward a perceived purpose? And what would you be doing? What would you be doing had money no business? New York City tells me 1 hour of the average human being's life is worth $7.25. And what is $7.25 to $1 if $1 is only a piece of paper, which is only a representation of value? We don't actually have anything to show for except what we purchased, which is only the value we give it, except what we give is measured by what we take and call valuable. And where is all the gold? Where is all the gold that these banks claim to represent? I wish I could tell you about some kind of inner gold you possess, but I'm still digging for mine as if I could own what's inside me, as if it's not part of something greater than matter or sight or this English which limits the agreements we can make together about our existence here together. In 2012, scientists claim they found the God particle, this question, this troubling missing factor of our weight, our hold, our value, they claim, and yet we have no evidence. We have no evidence except the collision of values. Most of what we know and how we see ourselves is determined by 5 Western countries, 5 of which determine value by how well they kill others. And we are out here screaming Black Lives Matter, as in exists or takes up space, as in atoms, molecules, as in mass. Ain't there some funny irony there? I'm starting to believe that this is all we value, is each other's death more than life. And if life's so valuable, how come, how so? It's not lost to me that death is part of life. Some die so others live, but who is doing all the dying exactly at the expense of all this living? And are you really, really being? I'm going to segue into the work that we do back home. And I met my partner, who is a community organizer based in Miami, Florida, where we live. And for those of you who don't know, Florida is at a really pivotal time right now. There's a lot of things going on that we've been organizing on the ground. So I was in that earlier conversation at the panel, and we talked about some of the ways that Romanian community feels helpless, or as if the corruption here is so great that there's nothing that can be done. If there's anyone who could tell you we feel that and we know that feeling, it's definitely us. The Black folks of America definitely know what it feels like to feel like, corruption is just rampant and there's no way to come against it. And because of this, what we've recognized is that there's power in the people, and that people power means that we can organize. And if we can organize, then we can gather people to start to shift, not just in terms of where they put their money or in terms of how they come together for meetings and all these other things, but also the platforms and the imagination and the ideas that we start to share. So art is integral in how we create the political platforms that we fight for. It's a big part of what we've used in Florida to try to shift the narrative. We recognize now that young people are not really engaged in the political process. So how do we get young people engaged in the political process? We've been working with, my partner and I have been working on Smoke Signal Studio. Can the brother in the back who has the computer, can you show the first website that I put up there? It's Smoke Signal Studio. It's the one that has the enter button. Maybe it'll show. Anyway, we started this studio, my partner and I, in our home, which means we didn't have much, there it is. We didn't have much resources, but what we did have was a home. We didn't know where we could go. Our neighborhoods are constantly being gentrified. Y'all know what gentrification is? When developers come into a neighborhood and try to kick you out and bring all these corporations and these larger businesses to come in, and so you can no longer afford the rent. So our homes have always been our safe space. As Black and brown people across the globe, homes are the place where we can take the most risks and the place where we can organize and strategize our true freedom and liberation. So what we did was we used our home and an extra room we had to create a music studio, and we started poetry workshops inspired by June Jordan, someone who believed that poetry, the true power of poetry, was to create a community of committed truth tellers. That in a society where alternative facts is the everyday life, it is important that young people can recognize what the truth is, especially in a time where there are false representations of the self being projected onto social media, and there's no classes, there's no education for young people about how to respond to social media, how to recognize that social media is not reality, that it is a figment of the imagination. And so one of the things we're trying to do is to get young people to be aware of how they use social media, but also that social media is not an organizing space. Yes, it can amplify your voice, but we must still gather in person to have real difficult conversations, to create, to imagine, to argue with each other, to throw events, parties, etc. You could press the enter button. So this is Oshun. This is our living room right here, where we organized readings, we organize poetry events, we organize different alternative value systems. One of the things that we've practiced is how do we show young people that money is not God? Because young people believe, you know, one of the faults of hip hop culture, and also if y'all know the government's influence on arts and culture, which is what I said about the Cultural Cold War, that a lot of times people are paid to perpetuate and to share the propaganda of elitism and individualism and hoes and bitches and all that stupid stuff, right? So how do we get people to understand that love is our principle, and that in actuality, we need to get our language has to be very articulate. So you don't say, I need money, right? Instead of saying, I need money, we're teaching young people to say, I need food, I need shelter, I need water, I need clothes, I would like. That's a different thing, right? To learn the difference between I need and I would like. And to also recognize that language is how we arrange our world. So if we're not creating spaces where young people can really be particular about their language, then we're also doing a disservice to our young people, because literacy is together with liberation. People need to be able to be literate to articulate their visions for themselves. Can you please go to Dream Defenders, the next website? And then I'll try to end as soon as possible. This next thing right here, I was inspired because I've been seeing what's been shared, and a lot of times people ask me to come read, but they don't see the work I'm doing in the world. So I said I might as well use this as an opportunity to share it. So this is something we've been working on, which is called Freedom Papers. It's a pamphlet that we've been sharing with young people across Florida right now, because there's a primary election that literally is going to shift. We just did the primary election that's going to shift the state of Florida. And if you know anything about politics in the states, Florida usually ends up being that state that you look at like really funny, like, what the hell are y'all doing? You know, like, why? What's wrong with you? you're ancient. So what we recognize is that we have to politicize the public. The community has to be engaged, to learn, to understand, to have discussions. And for it to be easy, the language has to be easy enough for a child to understand. So how do we do that? We used, with the inspiration of a poem by Martina Spada called Angels of Bread. And it's a poem that talks about this is the year. This is the year that all the things that we want to see happen. So we called 2018 our year. So this is the year that we wanted to see a transformation and shift in Florida. And if you know anything about what's happening in Florida, we have been able to help change and shift Florida. We have our first potential black governor in the state of Florida, which is not enough that he's just black, but it's also the fact that he's coming on a progressive platform that young organizers on the ground created for him. A platform that's about equal wages, a platform that's about Medicaid, a platform that's about rights restoration, things that affect the individual's right to vote, the individual's right to have access. Florida is one of 2 states that does not give formerly incarcerated people the right to vote. So when you get out, you do not, even though you served your time, even though you did everything that you were supposed to do, you still are challenged by the state, and that means 1.7 million people are kept out of the voting system. This is important because we're also talking about this at the time of an immigration crisis in our country, and it's a question that Bob Moses, who's from SNCC, brings to us about undocumented. What does it mean to be undocumented, and how does a citizen go to document themselves? So America's at a very crucial point in its history to really question what does it mean to be a citizen? How do we protect citizens? How do citizens document themselves? And what are the ways that the system is preventing people from documenting themselves so that they can exercise their right to vote, so that they can exercise their right to influence the state of politics. So this Freedom Papers, you can see it online, there are videos and stuff. It's dreamdefenders.org. We've been attacked very much by the right, so I feel like we're doing something great. We know we are winning, because if they're attacking us, we must be doing something right, right? So the last thing I'm gonna share with you is a video that is born out of this mantra of this is the year. And we've been attacking, especially with the conversation that just happened before me, just thinking about, for me, what's crucial is not just to say that art is important or that art can shift things, but it's not art alone that can do those things. If you just keep art in a museum, it's not going to transform the community. So art has to be engaged with political organizing. Art has to be a part of how we create a new way of organizing, because we know art is political. We need to stop having that debate. It is. It has been used in political ways. So it's always been political. So now that we know that we can agree and move on, now artists, those of you who are in the room, where will you bring your art? How will you use your art? What spaces will your art be used? What stories will your art tell? How do you marry a photographer with a community organizer who's trying to make and shift the culture around rights restoration or around gay marriage, for example, something that you all are very concerned about right now? So what are the ways that artists are coming out into the streets and are pushing the envelope of how Romania can see what love truly looks like? What does a campaign of love look like, in the words of John Lennon, right, and Yoko, who was shown up here? They thought that the only way love could win in America was that it had to be advertised to the people like a brand, like McDonald's or H&M or fucking iPhone or something, right? Because that's what people can take. That's how people ingest information. So that's why our artists are used so much against us in our communities. Our artists are tools. And if we're not careful, something like Colin Kaepernick with Nike can happen, where you take the voice of a movement and then you exploit it by making it, by absorbing it and making it a buffoonery of what it actually is. So this video, I love it because I think if Yaya finds out that I did this for her in Romania, she's just gonna, so if somebody can videotape this for me, please, it'll be great. Her mom is incredible. This is an 8-year-old girl who we work with in Florida, who is a true visionary, a vibrant young girl who's really changing the way that young people get engaged, who's using her voice, who's hilarious, and we use her as a way to challenge the GEO group. The GEO group is a group that is responsible for the cages that y'all have been seeing little kids in. And so across the state of, across America. And so this was a way why not use a child's voice to respond to the GEO group who benefits and who profits off of the breaking of families and the caging of children. So thank you for playing this for me.
Mama always says that what's done in the dark always comes to light. My name is Yaya. I'm a dream defender, and I'm on a mission to expose the people who don't want me to grow up and be free. I call them the dream killers. The GEO Group is the largest prison company in the world. They make billions off separating families and putting Black, Latino, and poor white people in jail. That's not just wrong, it's sick. Let me show you how it works. GEO gets money to run prisoners from the Florida government. They take that money to hire guys in suits who influence politicians with money. These politicians vote for new prisons or laws that put more people in jail. Then GEO gets people in their prisons, and the cycle starts all over again. Rick Scott, Adam Putnam, Lauren Book, and even Andrew Cuomo, all the way in New York, takes money from the GEO. That can't be true. Guess what? It is. This PSA is brought to you by Dream Defenders. Download the Freedom Pledge and tell your politician to pick a side. My name is Yaya the Us. Fierce. God bless.
Give it up for Yaya.
Dream killers.
So this is a small way that young people can now learn about a really large issue
Mama always
and able to talk about it.
What's done in the dark always
You can pause
comes to
that now,
light.
thank you. So I'll end there, and I'm going to end with a quote that, as I said, I come in the tradition of Black radical feminists, the imagination, and also the Black arts movement. And one of the mentors of mine is from The Last Poets, and one of the things that he says is that if you want to see how ugly the world is, just place something beautiful in it. And so I think we don't need to focus so much on how horrible things are, but we need to start to create and to implement the things that we want to see. And by virtue of that, the ugly will come to light. And I think truth will be revealed in that. And so I give so much love and commendment for all of you coming here. And hopefully you're inspired to put more things into the world that will transform your society in collaboration with community. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.